Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Emerging Brands Podcast with Kelly Bennett. Today, I have a really special guest, someone who I admired and followed online, and then I've had the privilege of working with. She is the founder of a book publishing company from the Emerging Brand Incubator. I actually got to meet her IRL in New York not too long ago after years of working together online. Kristen McGuiness, founder of Rise Writers and Rise Books. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited.
I'm still so excited we got to meet in person. Like was like one of the great joys of this summer. I was like, and I got to meet Kelly Bennett.
Same, right back at you. It really was. It felt so awesome because right when I gave you a hug, I was like, I feel like I've always known you in person. Like it just was very seamless from our online world to IRL. And that for me is when I feel that from someone, I'm like, these are one of my people, So I'm just really thrilled that we're also now recording this episode because I've been wanting to interview you for a while and you've been...
I think we're on like 2 years of trying to book this.
Yes. And so the day is here.
Today's arrived.
Today is the day.
Back to school and we finally are doing it.
I am honored. And I am so excited. So for someone who is new to your orbit and new to what you do, can you give us a little behind the scenes of the story behind Rise Writers and Rise Books of why did you do this? Why did you start a book publishing company? What are you doing? How did this happen?
Why am I this crazy? I was actually having lunch a couple of weeks ago with another book publisher, and she's also a publisher of an independent book publishing house. And I was like, we're just like stupidly ambitious people. Like it's like doesn't make any sense. Like, but we are doing these crazy things. But I think like anybody who creates anything, because there's a need, and if there wasn't a need, then I wouldn't be doing it. And I think that so a couple of years ago, I started with a book coaching business. And I was probably a whopping 1 month into that business when one of my clients said, you're going to end up opening up a book publishing house, right? Because he knew that and he is actually on our list. But he saw that, which was obviously going to happen, that I was going to be working with clients who weren't necessarily going to find themselves with a traditional publisher. And he knew that for himself. Like he knew that he would struggle to get a traditional publisher. He obviously was more savvy about how things work than other folks necessarily are. And so he foresaw, which I very quickly saw as well, that I was going to have the opportunity to work with amazing writers, amazing thinkers, amazing activists, amazing people changing the world, who also were going to struggle to get a traditional book deal. And not that there aren't a bunch of wonderful, small and large independent presses in this world, but I was going to uniquely know what their book was and how to publish it. And so I began to grow that book coaching business. I'm celebrating 3 years of that business on September 4th, which is crazy.
Congratulations.
I kind of started in July, but it was like September 4th was the day that I officially left my full-time job and was like, and now I am a business owner.
Wow.
And so and we launched it. And for those of you who are listening, the day I actually quit that job and launched my business, I went to Office Depot, as one does, right, to celebrate. And and at Office Depot in Ventura County, I ran into Angeline, who is like a celebrity in Los Angeles. She's very famous for buying billboards of herself throughout like the 1990s. She drives a hot pink Corvette and she wears all hot pink, and she has these like a very large set. And but like seeing Angeline is like considered like a good luck omen in Los Angeles. So if like you see Angeline, you're like, it's like a little rub of gold on your shoulder. And the day I launched my business, I ran into Angeline in the parking lot of Office Depot, and like we got photos. And so that was the day I launched my business. And I knew, I was like, I think we're going to be fine, folks.
I literally
Angeline
have goosebumps. I love that so much.
our company. Yeah. Ironically, the day, I will say this, you know what kind of storyteller I am. The day we sent in our beer and alcohol license for my husband's pizza shop, because we were dual entrepreneurs, because we're a special set of crazy, we ran into Angeline again at the post office sending in the beer and alcohol stuff. And it was like, there she was. She literally blessed us again with our other business. But that's only people in Los Angeles will understand, and they will be like, whoa.
I love this so much. I didn't even know of Angeline, but I will be Googling shortly after recording. But I love that. And I absolutely know whenever you tell a story, it always has the coolest ending or twist or turn. Like I just love your life updates whenever we start a call together. I'm like, how are everything go? And you're like, well, this and that.
What crazy shit is going on now?
I always thoroughly enjoy it. So I am not surprised at all that Angeline has blessed both businesses on launch day. I love that so much. So tell me about the book publishing aspect of it too, because you've worked in traditional publishing. You've worked with some of the biggest publishers, right, in the world. And you saw from the behind the scenes, you yourself are a best-selling author too. So you've seen it from both sides of the street. And you also then saw that there was a need for different paths to publishing, right? That people that had great stories and stories that needed to be heard, but they were being overlooked by traditional publishing houses. So what gave you that encouragement, or maybe that next stage of from book coaching to, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a publishing house. I'm going to do it. What was that shift for you?
I mean, I think it was really the authors. And I mean, the way I look, I mean, it's a very accurate metaphor, I think. You know, big book publishing, and this is Simon and Schuster, HarperCollins, Random House, and the people that own Macmillan. So that's St. Martin's, Farrow, Straus, and Giroux. And I mean, those are sort of the big four, and Hachette, that was formerly Warner Brothers. So those are the big five publishers. They are still a big five. They almost became a big four when Random was going to buy Simon, but that didn't happen. So there's still a big five publishing. Not surprisingly, most of those publishers are actually owned or are, you know, in the same global family as a studio, like a Warner Brothers, as I just mentioned, or Paramount or Universal. I mean, a lot of times Fox, for example, owns HarperCollins. And so it's a little bit like when you make a movie. You can make a movie in the studio system. You can make a Marvel film with, you know, is that Disney, I think, right? Disney, and you know, and you can get those kind of budgets and that kind of bandwidth, or you can make an independent film. You can be A24, you know. I mean, there's tons of independent film producers and independent film out there. And so I just think that I was working with clients who weren't, you know, they weren't the Disney fit, both in terms of scope, but also content. And so being an independent really gives you a lot more opportunity to, you know, publish smaller, make it, you know, you don't have to sell 50,000 copies to meet a bottom line for shareholders at Viacom, right? So it's it's a different sort of business structure. And so we're distributed by Simon & Schuster, which is amazing. Rise Books has a distribution deal with Simon & Schuster, which gives us the leverage that they do our sales, they sell into shops for us. They're amazing. Fantastic. I can't say enough about them. I was just talking, I'm also the co-founder of another publishing house, Row House Publishing, and I was just talking to Rebecca the other day about the level of support that we get from Simon & Schuster is amazing, but we still have the flexibility of an independent. And so it's really like a wonderful combination. I've worked with other independents that don't have big distribution deals, and it is tough. It's tough to get your book in Barnes and Noble. It's tough to sell into specialty shops unless you're just going to that store, but to have a sales rep that's doing that selling for you is just phenomenal. And then they manage a lot of the structural stuff. So but I think that in terms of being able to create an independent publisher where, we can publish people who don't have massive platforms. And, I was doing a Kickstarter last spring, as you well know. And
Yes.
as I was filming the Kickstarter, as you well know, I went to say, like, I've worked in book publishing for 20 years. And instead, without even thinking, the words came out of my mouth. I've worked in book publishing for 20,000 years. And so
it was a favorite moment of mine, watching that video.
Mine too. Only because I was seriously just came out of my mouth. And I didn't even catch it. I was like, I guess so. But having worked in book publishing for 20,000 years, I really believe that you can build a platform off of a book. And I do. I believe, I'm about to, and I think especially for people who struggle with social media, I wouldn't say that I love self-promotion. That's not my most fluent language. I struggle with the time management to actually post stuff online unless I have a reason to be there. I'm not someone who's like, here's my life every day. That's just not natural to me. It's not, I don't have any judgment around it. I wish I could do it more. I say I speak social media the way I speak French. I can buy a mattress, but I can't get into a debate around World War II. So, so it's just not. But if I have a product, I get out there. If I've got something to talk about, I'm actually pretty comfortable talking about it. Give me a reason and I'm there. And so I think that a book is a reason for a lot of people to get out there, to begin to build content, to share that content, to build community, to be in community in a really authentic way. And they've got something there to share. And so I do believe books can help people to build those platforms. Unfortunately, though, for a lot of big publishers and even a lot of big independents, they want to see that platform is built before they're willing to give you the book deal. And so for us at Rise Books, and especially for folks coming out of Rise Writers and out of our book coaching programs, I really saw an incredible opportunity for people to be published without that and to really begin to create interesting marketing campaigns that you're a huge part of.
Thank you. Well, thank you for bringing me in because it is really cool. And that also brings me to my next question of how you've been creating this ecosystem for emerging authors, for writers, for people who've been curious or feeling like there's a book inside of them, but they're not quite sure what that looks like, or someone who had a bit more seasoned, maybe writer, but landing a book deal has been the hardest challenge that they've had. You've created this ecosystem that is just so incredible. And again, seeing it behind the scenes and with the launch of your website and even with the Kickstarter, it's been so cool seeing all the pieces that you've been talking about really all solidifying and playing their own role, because it takes many different pieces from what I've learned from you to bring a book from your brain to someone's hands, right? And so I would love if you could give a little bit of insight of how you've been doing this. You have Rise Writers, you have Rise Retreats, you have Rise Books. Can you give us a little of that behind the scenes of how you created those brand extensions?
Yeah. And I mean, again, I have you to thank for this, Kelly. It's going to turn into a Kelly Bennett advertisement.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you.
Me, but I cannot say enough working with you. I always say, and I do want to get my husband working with you too on his restaurant. I mean, I tell Terry all the time about just how fantastic you are about helping people to develop their ideas, create the implementation plan, and then bug them about actually implementing that plan. So it's exactly what everybody needs.
I do that. I'm like, hey.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ideas I think, I came up with you really was this idea of developing a path to publishing.
Yes.
And so and trying to create also an equitable path to publishing. And I think that's the one thing that I know about book publishing. It has historically been a very, like all arts, right? I mean, if you had all the money in the world and you could just lay around and do art all day and pay to get it published, you know, then you'd be an artist, right? But for a lot of us, and I do come from, you know, I have to pay my own bills, and I have a lot of bills to pay. So, and I've just, you know, I didn't grow up with those opportunities or resources. And so I have struggled myself as an artist of like, I've had to take the day job that made it really hard for me to write the book so many times over, you know. I also have been a ghostwriter professionally, and it was great. That's actually where I was able to make more money than I'd made doing anything else. But I also, that's totally stopped me from writing my own book, you know, and I had to put it on pause because I was so busy writing other people's books. And so I really tried to create this path that people can come in through many different ways based on wherever they're at in life. I also try to create a path that is really gentle for people who are working jobs, who are moms, who have other things going on, but still have this desire inside them to write a book. And so, you know, that really starts with offering free resources and workshops and, you know, talks and different things. But then ultimately we do group coaching, which is sort of like, and there's scholarships involved in discounting, but we, you know, that's the area where I can discount someone, where it's really hard for me to have a private client who's free, but I can always offer people a spot in a group workshop. And so I really love group workshops for that. And so we have 3 different series of that right now. We have 5 days to find your story. The next one is actually coming in September, which is really just for people that are book curious. You know, they know they want to write, they don't know what that looks like. And it's really about helping them to develop their idea. And at the end of it, to have like an intro and an outline for their book, so they know where they want to go with it. And then the second one is 5 weeks to book proposal, which I will very quickly say, you know, depending on the genre of the book you are writing, some books are sold on full manuscript, memoir, fiction. That's pretty much it. Memoir and fiction is always sold on full manuscript. Almost everything else is sold on proposal, and some memoir is sold on proposal, just depending. But so for people that are writing in any kind of narrative nonfiction, they're doing a book proposal, self-help, spirituality, personal development, you know, business. Those are going to be book proposals. So we do a group called 5 weeks to book proposal. Our next one is in November. And then I do another group called 5 months to memoir, which is obviously the sort of big group where people are writing the first draft of their memoir. And I always tell people that, you know, look, most people have to take it twice, because it's really hard to write a book in 5 months. You can do it. And as a ghostwriter, I've written books in 2 weeks. So it's not impossible. Joey Gorga from Real Housewives of New Jersey, I wrote his book in 2 weeks with a newborn. So it was a really hysterical, right? Yeah, I literally had like I think Dylan was, I want to say 3 or 4 weeks old. And at the best, my Angeline story for Joe Gorga, which I always share because it was the funniest. He was doing his acknowledgments and he wanted me to help him write him. And then it got to me, you know, you have to acknowledge your ghostwriter. And he goes, well, I don't know what to say. And I said, I can't write my own acknowledgement, Joe. And he was like, just say, you know, she was terrific. She had babies crawling all over her and she still wrote the book. She had babies. And it was, seriously, I had babies crawling all over me and I still wrote the book. Oh. So
this is why I love your stories.
Yeah, because there was the crazy Joe Gorga stories. Andy Cohen, I am available.
Yes.
My dream interviews. I'm not even into Real Housewives. I'm just into Andy Cohen.
I can see this. Yes, let's manifest this.
I feel like our kids would get along. It feels like he has beagles. I love beagles. Andy, I'm coming for you, Andy.
Call Kristen.
Yeah. So, but we have 5 months to memoir. And then for folks, you know, who are usually more advanced in their careers, like they do have a platform, they're more likely to sell a book. I have private clients, and that's at more premium pricing. And then ultimately, as people move through that system, you know, then they have the opportunity to be published. And so much like the private versus group options, we also have 2 options there, which Rise Books is the primary publishing house, which is a traditional publisher. There's a small advance, a much more generous profit share involved in that. And we really curate that list. We're going to be opening up submissions in September, but it's very niche in terms of what we're publishing. And I'll say to you now, like, I've really, for a long time, I was kind of using this term of radical inspiration, but I'm actually really now moving into thinking of those books as inspired activism, because I really want the book to be a work of activism. And I know, like, when we were in New York, we were talking about that.
Yes.
My book, I am actually the first author on Rise Books, and really looking at how do we coordinate activism with that book. And that has led me to think, like, wait, how do we coordinate activism around all of our books at Rise Books? And I think that really is my goal with that company. And then we also have an imprint, Ascend Publishing, which is for books in personal development, wellness, and business. And that is actually where folks can purchase publishing packages, but they get all the benefits of Rise Books. So they're working with an editor, an editorial director. We have ghostwriters on staff, and with our director of marketing and publicity, who you got to meet, Lauren Schwartzfeld. Shout out to
so
Lauren.
Cool. So
I know,
cool.
and I know you guys have continued to connect. Which is
yeah. I really enjoy talking with her.
And so that's Ascend Publishing, which is an imprint of Rise Books. And so really it's about just offering all of these ways for folks to find their path to publishing based on where they're at and what kind of resources they have, but whether, they're able to purchase a publishing package and guarantee themselves a spot on our publishing list with Ascend, or there's someone who's just starting out in a group program who's being scholarshiped in and is just beginning their writer's journey. We really wanted to create a space that's open for all who dream of being a writer, and really just walking with them on that path. And I know for myself, I always say, like, I myself as a writer, I'm always looking for my Kristen McGuiness.
Yes, I can see that.
So because it is, like, really, and my Rise writers, because it's so important to have those cheerleaders around you, the group and the community. And we really do have a beautiful community of writers who, have started with me. My first two authors, actually, outside of myself at Rise Books, are two folks who started in our 5 weeks to book proposal program. The first, Maggie Boxey, whose book is coming out in April. She was in my first group ever. And Amy Miranda, whose book is coming out in December, What We've Forgotten. She was in my second group ever in 2021. So yeah, so it's really exciting.
That's so exciting. And you touched upon that you are going to be publishing your book and that you are the first author from Rise Books, which is so exciting. So could you give us a little sneak peek of your book? I did get an advance copy and it's so good. And just like the energy radiating off of it, it just feels really special. Could you give us a little sneak peek of what's going on behind the scenes
I'm
there?
on with you, even though I know this is it, but this is the finished copy.
It's gorgeous.
Yesterday. So anyway, yeah.
Wow.
It's a real book.
It's a real book.
We did the unboxing video last night in my yard. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting. Yeah, no, it's wild. So I wrote this book starting in 2016. I did have to take a break because I was ghostwriting Joe Borga's book and many others for a period there. But I will say, I struggled to get it published, and I believed in it so much. I just knew I had something to say. And I mean, I have ghostwritten 20 books. I've been on the LA Times bestsellers list. I've edited a lot of huge writers and authors, both some more literary, some like Dr. Phil,
right.
And I have always said, like, I know a good book. I mean, people pay me to tell them whether it's a good book,
right.
That's my whole career. And I knew it was a good book. And I knew it was an important book. It is about gun violence, and it is a very specific call to action about banning assault weapons in this country and using the executive order to do that. I mean, it's a very clear moment in the book.
Yes.
But it's also about modern life and, being middle class and middle-aged in modern America. And it definitely looks different than what we thought it was going to look like. And it's, just trying to make it through. And, and as I said, even before we began, I mean, I at one point did have the 9 to 5 job where I barely saw my child, and that's not with any judgment. I understand that that's what a lot of people, we have no choice but to do that. And I would drop her off at 8 a.m. and I would pick her up at 5:45, and I would rush home and I would make dinner and I would feed her and I would bathe her and I would put her to bed, and that was the end. And then because I did have other dreams on the weekend, I was trying to write books, and it meant like I could barely see her then either. I mean, I still did, but and I was just like, I don't like, why is this what our life is? Like, why are we thinking this is the only option? And so the book is, it's about gun violence, but it's also a lot more about the systems in which we live, and that we all know there has to be a better way. And at some point we have to stand up and say there has to be a better way. And it's really sad because I think we just had an amazing opportunity, and not that there haven't been shifts, and there's been some really good systemic changes, like in terms of, wages that people, I mean, we own a small business and we pay a lot more than we would have paid 6 years ago. And we are totally, I mean, we don't really make that much money, but we are thrilled to be doing that so that others are getting a livable wage. And I think there have been some shifts in our culture, but I also think that like this idea of a 5-day work week, this idea of a 40-hour work week, and not being able to, especially since both parents work, like, it doesn't make sense. And I just think there's a better way to live and a better way to demand that we get to live. And so the book is about that too. And it's really just, it's about living through this, both like the tragedy, but also just living through this life. Yeah.
So powerful for you, because you just touched upon it. What do you think makes a good book?
I think has to be a spiritual adventure. I mean, I am like, my grandmother and I are talking about it, like, I was somebody who, like, I was terrible at group sports. I hate, if you throw a ball at me, I will run in the other direction. Like, that was never, they'd be like, Kristen, wrong way. And I'd be like, no, right way.
Yeah. Getting out of here.
I'm going that way. Like, it was never, I always wanted to be like a virtuoso at like instruments. And if I wasn't, like, if I couldn't pick up piano in 2 weeks, forget it. And I have tried so many times, but even now in adulthood, I tried piano and I was like, after 2 weeks, I wasn't a virtuoso. And I was like, I'm done with this. I have no interest. I think there were only 2. I am a recovered alcoholic. So I did actually feel like I was naturally a very good drinker. The first time I ever got drunk, I drank everybody under the table. And I was like, finally, something I'm good at.
I'm really good at this.
This is like a natural talent. But I think my other natural talent wasn't necessarily writing. I actually feel like, but my natural talent was reading. My natural talent was like a love of books. And I was like, in first grade, I read like full novels. Like, I was a voracious, like very advanced reader. Like, I was reading 5th grade level in like first grade. And like, I was reading like college level by like 4th grade. Like, I was reading Catcher in the Rye in 3rd grade. My grandmother didn't really know what to give me. So she just gave me Daniel Steele books and a lot of J.D. Salinger. And that's like all I read was like really like incredibly explicit romances that no 3rd grader should ever read. And I now have an 8-year-old. I'm like, if she ever read what I was reading, my grandmother actually recently was like, maybe you should give her some Danielle Steele, like completely seriously. And I was like, no, I'm not. I really don't want to know about oral sex in 3rd grade. Like, I'm good with that.
We're good with that.
Yeah. But wondered why I was so sexually advanced. So anyway, but I love to read. And I think it was just like, I did have an awkward and tough childhood. And I think that like reading was a very easy escape for me. But I also love this, like, I've always had just a wild imagination. And I loved entering these worlds that were just really spiritual adventures. And that these characters could go and do anything, and that's really what I loved. And as a writer, it's why I might write nonfiction again at some point. My first book was a memoir, but I really love fiction because I love this idea that, these characters, as I say, in memoir, your character is going to open the door, and the choice is, do I walk through the door or don't I? In fiction, they can set the door on fire. They can fly out the door. They can, they can break the door, they can do whatever they want because it's fiction and you're not bound by reality unless you're writing like a more magical memoir like Lydia Yuknavitch or something. But I think that for the most part, you're just not bound to what happened, and you get to really create this whole world. And I love that idea. I love the idea of creating universes. And I think that as a kid, that's what I loved, was being able to enter all of these different universes. And I'll end just by saying one of my all-time favorite quotes is from Salman Rushdie from the book Midnight's Children. And he says, in order to understand one life, you have to swallow the world. And I just think, like, to me, that was always, that's what I feel like as a writer, like our job is to swallow the world. And that's how we share just one life, So
what a powerful quote and sentiment.
It's one of my favorite books. But that quote, when I read it, I was in college and I was just like, that's why I want to be a writer. Like, that's it.
And that was going to be my next question, as far as how does someone realize that they are a writer?
I think, I think for some people like myself, I grew up always wanting to be a writer. I remember I went to like a Ren fair when I was in like 5th grade, and I went to like a tarot reader or something. And I was like, am I going to be a writer? And apparently she was a terrible tarot reader, because she told me I was going to be a lawyer and a judge. And that's probably why I never went to law school, because I was like, no way. My mom was a legal assistant at a law firm, and I grew up in a law firm basically because she worked all the time. And I was like, I am not going to be a lawyer. And I was like, and a judge, like, I'm not going to wear a black robe. Like, I like fashion. Okay. Like, I'm not. So I always wanted that. But I find, like, through my clients, like, I just spoke to somebody today who's in my group coaching program. She never dreamt of being a writer. And it wasn't until COVID, she's a doctor and she works in hospitals, and she saw a lot of really horrible tragedy in COVID, and she started writing about it. And I think, I think that's the beauty of writing. It's not, and I think a lot of people think like, oh, I've had to be writing since I was a kid, or I had to have been like a virtuoso, right? And I always remind people, like, it's like music, right? Like, every once in a while there's a Mozart. Every once in a while there's someone who by the age of 5, they were already proficient, right? But like, but actually most of us are just learning our whole lives. And that process can be scaled based on any number of variables, and I work with people who are just like fantastic writers out of the gate. And I work with people who grow as writers. And and in our group coaching program recently, we had someone who I know, she was really struggling as to write, and it just wasn't coming together. And I could see it, like, that flow wasn't happening. And she's been sort of in and out of the group just because of life. And she recently wrote something. She shared it with the group last week. And another person who's been in the group for a while too, like, she was like, you finally fucking did it, And it was like, yeah, like, it finally, like, it was so beautiful. And like, but it didn't happen on the first try, So I just think, writing is really a practice in patience. And I know that for myself, like, I'm still growing as a writer. Like, I look to I would love to do an MFA program, even though I've written so many books. Like, I would love that kind of like just warm, long bath and craft, and really like learning things that I don't know. And one day I'm going to figure that out.
I love how you talk about writing. I really do. The way that you explain the experience, like, I could listen to you talk about writing all day. I really can. You make it just feel so magical, because I know that that's the experience that you have with writing. And as someone who's dyslexic with learning disabilities, and writing is definitely not a strength of mine by any stretch of the means, I really love how you talk about it, because it just makes me feel connected to something that has always been a struggle for myself. And the way that you approach it and just make it feel more accessible also, that it doesn't have to be super intimidating, and someone could just start, even if they're not great at it. They could just practice something and learn something. I just really appreciate what you do around writing and for people who are curious about writing a book.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're
I mean,
welcome.
I just think it's about making it not this scary, fancy thing,
Right.
because it really isn't. It's this thing, it's a tool that's available to us all. And for some people, like writing and publishing a book is not necessarily the end game. I mean, sometimes it's just about the journey of writing. And I always say, like, that first draft should always be for you. And if that's all you write, that's more than enough.
Right.
So it really is just beginning to see it as a tool of healing, as a tool of activism, as a tool of whatever you want it to be in your life. For some, it's a tool of business, and that's perfectly fine too. But like, it really is just seeing it as a tool. And it's one that, like, the more we do it, the more we find a community that we connect to with it. And there's tons, I'm not the only business in town, but like, I do try to make it that we really create a loving, gentle community that doesn't have, I'm not a highbrow writer, and it's something that I was talking to somebody recently, like, I find, I've had really good reviews. I just got a fantastic review on from Kirkus on Live Through This, which was amazing. And it was a very
Right.
but I do find like a lot of like literary world like has these sort of expectations of how writers should write. And it's not to condemn it. I love those writers too. I just think there's a lot of different types of writers out there for a lot of different types of readers. And so you don't have to think you have to be like this kind of writer in order to get something out there in the world and in order for it to connect with somebody else. And so, I mean, that's why I told Terry yesterday, like, I know my book is, I mean, I hope people that aren't mothers relate to it. And I think it's about a lot more than motherhood, but I think that the main character in it is going through such really specific experiences of a married woman with a child who is clearly not living the life that she thought she would be living and who isn't living the life she should be living. And
Right.
I think that for so many women, they are in that space and they don't know what to do. And they find themselves miserable in what should actually be a glorious experience. I mean, I don't know if marriage, marriage is a questionable thing. I don't know whether we need it, but I know we do need, if we want to continue the species, we do need to have children. I mean, one of those things is just an evolutionary requirement. The other one is like a societal thing.
Yeah.
So marriage can go. I mean, it's fine. But like having children is how we actually stay on this planet. And like that should be a glorious experience. And when the rest of your life doesn't feel aligned with who you are, motherhood becomes another job. And that's a real bummer. And I've had that experience of motherhood. And I've also had the glory. I mean, I just got off of it. And it's not that I wasn't thrilled to drop my kids off to school today, but like I got to spend I had fun. I had that like, oh my God, this is why you're here and this is why I'm doing this. And that is really hard to have sometimes when the work doesn't feel aligned and the healing doesn't feel aligned and the passion for living doesn't feel aligned. And I've been there too. And so really like Live Through This is a lot about that. And I know who I'm writing for. And so I don't think it needs to feel literary in order for it to connect with my reader, And so that's
beautifully said.
I write. And that's why I try to help other people to write too.
And I think the way that you're creating many paths to publishing for emerging authors, you're also creating different paths for readers to find the type of books that really work for them.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. So I could talk to you for hours because you're one of my favorite people.
Yeah.
Because we do. Yeah. But I would love for you to give people insight on how they could start working with you. What's that next step? How to know what their next path looks like or what path to get on. If you could just walk us a bit through of just helping people get started.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the groups are the great way to start. So our next group is 5 days to find your story. It runs every day at 9 a.m. PST, noon EST. I've tried to do it so it can fit into people with day jobs. You can maneuver. It's also, you don't have to be there every day. We take the class and all of the tools that are provided you can do outside of the group. And then always, it's great if you can come to a couple of them. So that begins, I believe it's September 25th. I don't have a calendar right in front of me, but it's Monday in September. So whenever that, you might be faster at this right now. Yep, September 25th.
Yep.
So it's
September
the
25th.
25th through the 29th. You can go to risewriters.com. I'm sure by the time you post this, it will be posted as well. That is a great way. If you're interested in private coaching, then you can, find us at risewriters.com. There's a contact page there. Go ahead and email us. You can also directly schedule with me to do a 20-minute call just to talk about where you're at and see what is the best fit. And if you already done, if you know you want to do a book, you're interested in a publishing package, certainly reach out for a send. We have 4 spots available for 2025 and very excited to start publishing people there. And then in terms of Rise Books, we are going to begin accepting open submissions in September. So that should launch right after Labor Day. I'm working with Kate, a fellow Kelly Bennett client on the website, and we are updating all of that next week. So we're going to have that launch very soon with all the submissions and submission ability for people to send stuff in.
So incredible. And when does your book go out into the world?
My book launches October 10th, and we are having, I think it's a 5-city tour now. I think that's where we're at. But we're putting all the dates and places down. But it looks like we're going to be doing Bedford, New York on October 10th. We are working right now on Boston for October 12th or 13th. And then we're doing Los Angeles, Santa Monica at Zibby Books on October 17th with me and Jennifer Pasteloff. I should say Boston is with Laura McCowan, the author of The Lucky Ones. I believe I have to get that title right. And then Jennifer Pasteloff, author of On Being Human, doing Chicago on Tuesday, October 24th with the author Gina Frangelo and gun rights activist Brenda Mitchell, who is with Everytown for Gun Safety and Moms Demand. And then doing an event in Seattle on November 1st with the author Emily Paulson, who's a dear friend and client of mine, whose book Hey Hun about MLMs just came out this year in June from Row House. So so we're going to be doing a tour and lots of podcasts and media going, and hopefully Today's Show, or I was on Today's Show for my first book, and I keep saying it was like about my dating life, and I'm like, I don't get it. Like, you had me on for this silly little memoir, which was awesome. I'm very proud of my first book, but I'm like, this is like an important book about things we should be talking about. So Andy Cohen and the Today Show, those are
we are putting it out there.
We're putting it out there in the intrasphere. But I
love this so much. And you could say you heard it here first, everyone, on the Emerging Brand Podcast. So thank you so much. I'll add all the links to all the things in the show notes. And one last thing before I let you go, what is a piece of advice you would share with someone who starting a brand, they are in those early stages and they're like, I think I'm going to do this thing, or they kind of started. What would you tell that person?
We joked before this that you knew I was going to say run, but no, don't run. I mean, I also said after that, I love owning my own business. I 90% of the time love being an entrepreneur, and 10% of the time want to pull my hair out. So and I will say, don't do it alone. I mean, I think that's the biggest piece to me, and you have not paid me to say this, but like working with you, I mean, I work with other folks too. I have a lot. I am a coach. I really love coaching. I think it is so important. I have a business coach. I have my marketing coach. Like, I'm about to go hunt for another coach right now. Like, I love having coaches and people who have already done this before me, because there's so much that you don't know, right? And it's all about the question you don't. That's what's going to get you, right? The question you never knew to ask, and then you get the answer wrong too, and you're like, I didn't even know that was the question. And there is so much about building a brand and a business that you just don't know. And so having people who've already walked down the road, I really think the beauty of coaching to me is, I think it is a lot like apprenticeship, which is how we learn to do everything, how we've learned every trade across the course of humanity. And I think coaching is just the 21st century version of apprenticeship, where we get to share knowledge and it's this really beautiful relationship, and obviously turns into a lot of friendships too, and a lot of networking, a lot of awesome stuff. But really, if you go in it alone, it can be a really scary and terrifying place. And the more people you have around you holding your hand and leading you through and bugging you when you're not getting stuff done, which is, being your own boss can be hard sometimes.
Yes.
It's really critical to do all the great creative work that we are here to do. So
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for just being you and sharing your book and sharing your just passion and knowledge and insight to create this ripple effect and to make some really damn good impact on this world. And I just appreciate the hell out of you. So thank you so much.
thank you, Kelly. I'm so excited.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Go connect with Kristen, and I'll see you on the next episode.